Hey everyone, I'm Liz Hunt.
And I'm Chelsea Poppens.
And you are listening to the Agency Rocket Show, where we talk about the chaos of running a creative agency.
Woo! And we are still in our branding series. Today, we have a special guest, Keaton Haines, our DayCloud marketing coordinator, on the show with us to talk about social media basics for small businesses and how that branding gets pulled into social media. So we have our expert, Keaton. Will you give us a little bit of background on you and how you got into the agency life?
Shucks. Well, I was kind of born into agency life. So I kind of cut my teeth on it very, very young. My parents had an agency that they started out of Simi Valley, California. And when we moved to Utah when I was about 1, they just kind of started running it out of their basement in basically all of our houses. So like our very first home, I remember being down in the basement. They had like their photography studio and all of their old Macs like lined up on one wall. And they would be doing deadlines and I would be playing Pajama Sam on my computer. So that was just kind of like the way of things. And I just, I would hear them talking about deadlines. I had no idea what that was. It just sounded really important. Growing up, it was always really familiar to me. It was always just something that was going on. I'd be once again playing World of Warcraft once I was like 12 years old, listening to my dad talking to clients on the phone and just kind of hearing the language that he's utilizing as he's doing business. We'd have clients come meet us in our basement. Like it was just a very like casual thing, but his business has been running for 25 years now.
Wow.
And he's still running it out of Utah. I mean, I'd say that he's doing something right.
Yeah. So what were the roles between your parents? Because it's both your parents that do it,
both
right?
Of them. Yes,
so
correct.
Who kind of like, what were their respective roles in the business?
So my dad is the marketing guy. He does all the sales. He gets the clients. He does all the communication. And then my mom is just the art director, basically. She's the wrist, quote unquote. It's actually funny because my dad will try to do design sometimes because he is an artist, but he's also colorblind.
Oh.
So he'll be like, "Hey, Deb, can you take a look at this design?" And she goes, "What did you do? What is this?" He is talented. He just has, just a little bit of trouble with color. So, but they're just kind of running the whole thing. And then in high school was kind of when I was, trying to make a little bit of cash here and there. And my dad was like, "Hey, we have some clients that are interested in starting some social media accounts." And he was like, "You're young and hip. You know what the social medias are. I don't want to do it. So maybe you can just do it." That was when I was 16 years old. And so I've been running social media accounts for a few different clients for that long. Just kind of
That's a good tax deductible for any parents running a business. Pay your kids.
Pay your kids.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And so when you were first starting out as a 16-year-old social media guru, were you writing the content, doing captions, was it Facebook only at the time? Do you remember?
It started with Facebook only, and then we moved on to Instagram from there. This was kind of, I feel like it was prior to any sort of like scheduling tools or anything that you could utilize from like your desktop. So it was like, I had my phone at the time and I was just trying to do everything in real time on there. The scheduling wasn't quite a thing yet. So yeah, it was very much real time, and I had a lot of time because I was 16. So it was just how things went.
That's so awesome. Oh man. Wow. That's
also, it's really cool to bring to be like full family, like run agency, tying in even the kids into the process. I think that's really cool and special.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Canva wasn't really, I think it was a thing at the time too, but so it was mostly just my dad doing Photoshop images and like cropping everything square. He's like, "So it has to be a square, right? It has to be a square." And I'm like, "Yes, Dad, it has to be a square," which is not a thing anymore, but at the time. So he would do that. And then from there, I would just write all the copy and the captions and the hashtags and do all the strategy. So.
And then post and stuff. Man. That's so cool.
And then fast forward to where we're at today with social media and all of the platforms and all of the different avenues within each platform. Like, I think that ties us directly into like that next conversation piece is like, what is social media today? And what does that look like? I think a lot of our, like our small businesses, it's hard to keep up with what's new and trendy and upcoming, especially with AI. Like, what does that landscape look like specifically for 2025?
I mean, it's a good question just because it's constantly evolving every single day, every single minute. It's so fast now. Trends come and go within like days. And so I think it's just a matter of like keeping your finger on the pulse of it. But there are so many different social media platforms now. The big players right now are definitely Instagram and TikTok, especially amongst the younger generations. Older generations, you have Facebook, and then you also obviously have like the professional side of like LinkedIn. The app formerly known as Twitter is dying. People are still on there, but
I don't know. I don't think Twitter's going away. I don't think it is. I don't think it's going away. I have so many people still on it. I think Threads is the devil.
They're really pushing Threads.
Threads is the devil.
Instagram is really pushing Threads all the time.
Yeah, they are.
I don't need another platform to understand.
Right, yeah. And then you have Blue Sky coming in to try to like kind of replace X a little bit. But like the thing is, between 2022 and 2025, X lost 7 million active users. So I mean, I believe it's nothing to sneeze at. Maybe not dying entirely. There are still people that are loyal to it, but
does that also include like any bots that were just inactive accounts on Twitter?
Because I mean, it said active users specifically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about small businesses specifically. So, like, why would we say that social media is important for a small business? For a small business, why would we tell them they should be on social media?
Social media, I think it's an opportunity to build a meaningful connection with your clients, with your customers. For me, especially, and I don't know if you guys feel the same way about this, but I feel like if there's a place that I'm looking to go, like a new local restaurant or like a place that I've never been to, one of the first things I do is I will go to their Google just to see their hours and everything like that. And then from there, I'll go straight to their social media to see what they're posting, how active they are, kind of see maybe like what their building looks like, what their vibe is.
Yeah.
At this point in time, social media is a search platform. It's a search engine, you know.
Yeah.
TikTok and Instagram especially, people are using it like a search engine. And so being present on that is extremely important. Being available and active, even if it's just 2 to 3 times a week, is, I think, crucial for small businesses because it does build trust and credibility with your followers.
Yeah.
I think it's a red flag if I can't find people on social.
Yeah, yes. For sure.
Or Google specifically.
Yeah.
if you're not Googleable, red flag.
Yeah. Googleable. Yes. It's so true though. The first thing I do is Google it and look at their Google profile page to find out information. I will do honestly anything I can to not go to their website. Because usually the website is too much information that I don't want to have to cull through. And the Google profile is usually everything that I need. It's like the overview, the hours, the services, the about, photos that I want, and that's it.
And the reviews.
And then the reviews. The reviews is the huge piece. You can't get honest reviews on their actual website because they're only going to put the good stuff on their website. And so the reviews are going to be typically the most honest thing. And then, like you said, on their social media, if it's a restaurant, then I'll go to their social media to look at their food and the vibes and all that stuff. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a very good point. Yeah.
What comes to mind specifically is some of our Valley dealers. I think one of the biggest barriers for some of our Valley dealers who are a little bit older is the intimidation factor of all these new platforms and the learning curve for these new platforms. Just like your dad, Keaton, saying, you're new, you're hip, you're up with the platforms. And a lot of the question in some of I guess it depends on the business, is some of their mind is like, is that actually going to add value to me as a small business? Whether you consider yourself more relationship focused, you're in person with people and you're like, they don't look for me online. But in order to stay with the times, you have to kind of have a presence, have a digital presence, have an online presence for the reason that Liz and you, Keaton, said that how do we find business and starting from baseline?
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. One of the points that I like to make is social media is just another place to have really good customer service. It's just another touch point for you and your customers. If I see a business commenting and replying to their followers, if somebody makes like a nice comment and they're like, oh, thank you so much, we'd love to have you in the shop today. I think that's great. That's just like a little bit of extra cool points, in my opinion, and makes me want to visit the business more because I'm like, oh, they're really engaged. They care a lot.
Yeah, it's very true. And to your point, Chelsea, too, about maybe there's some business owners who think that they don't need to be in the digital sphere of things. The fact of the matter is that the world, the majority of humans in our country and Western civilization is on the digital sphere. And so even if you don't like it, your customers are there. And so people have iPhones and people have Androids and they're all connected to the internet and they don't just use them for emails anymore. They do use them for Googling things and they do use them for looking things up and looking at Facebook, at least Facebook.
Yeah.
And there's been countless conversations that I've had with business owners that they just don't like it. They're like, I don't care about Facebook. Well, that's fine that you don't, but your customers are going to be on there. And so the fact of the matter is that you need to be where your customers are. Even if you don't personally have a Facebook, that's fine. But if you want more customers, then you should probably show up where your customers are. So I think that's just something that we have to be honest about with ourselves.
You made a good point. Even if it's just a Facebook business page, I think that makes a huge difference. Like even if I'm looking for like a handyman, even though I have a husband, or somebody, somebody along that line, if they have a Facebook business page, like that's that's enough of a credibility for me sometimes. I mean, depending on what I'm actually searching for, but even if it's just a Facebook business page.
Yep.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe like, to that end, what are some of the misconceptions that small business owners have about social media? I mean, we've all seen them. We work with a ton of small business owners. We work with a ton of business owners in general. And so what are some of those misconceptions and myths about social media that we have run into over the years?
I think some people think that quantity is more important than quality. They have this idea that if they're going to start posting on social media, they better start posting every single day. Otherwise, it's not worth it. But I think something to keep in mind is like bombarding your audience and like overloading them with constant updates is kind of annoying. Being very intentional and keeping an eye on how your posts are performing, what frequency is doing better for you, even like 2 to 3 times a week. Is enough. It's plenty. It can be more effective. And it does depend. Some audiences want more content. Some might even want just a little bit less. But I just think that having that quantity, that constant, this always has to be posting all the time, I think it's overwhelming. And it's definitely a misconception that some people have. That's
interesting. There's a ton of other marketing types that would disagree with you.
Yeah.
but
the algorithm has changed.
Yeah.
The algorithm used to be the more you post, the more likely you are to have
it would show
trendy or more engagement. And nowadays, like the algorithm has shifted, like Keaton said, too. It is more about quality and engagement. And you see people like make it to the final carousel of this image. And if people make it to that final carousel, the algorithm's like, oh, they'll reward you. And so it definitely does look different than that mass. Put as much content out there as possible.
Right. And even like some of the higher ups at Instagram have confirmed that some of the most important statistics in 2025 are saves and sends. So if people are finding your content valuable enough, interesting enough, or relevant enough to send to a friend, or if they're saving it for later viewing, the algorithm favors that a lot more than it does your constant posting every single day.
Yeah. It's so interesting that they are continuing, they being the social media companies, are continuing to change the rules over the years. And I could see that being something that can be a barrier for a lot of small businesses. It's like, how am I supposed to keep up with all of these things? It's like the tax codes. At least that's like the tax codes for me. I'm like, this is why I pay somebody to do all this for me because I can never keep up with all of these tax laws. They literally change every year. And that's why with social media, I think a lot of small businesses are like, this is why we just don't even engage because it's changing so much and so quickly. More than the tax codes. I feel like new features come out and new algorithms show up and then a new platform shows up and you have to learn a whole new platform. And so,
I think that's the other misconception is like, you don't have to be doing it all. Kind of like we said previously, even if it's just posting once a month or once a week, even if it's just keeping people posted on promotions or seasonal trends that are going on with your business or events that you are putting on in store or whatever your industry is. Like, it's just like just relationship building and information that's valuable to that customer.
Yeah. Depending on the industry that you're in. So like if you are in ag, right? Like you mentioned earlier, Chelsea, once or twice post a week is probably perfect. Because to your point earlier, Keaton, you don't want to spam your customers because they're very susceptible to, we will not handle that. We do not want to be spammed. We do not want the extra junk, right? But then if you are a retail company, you better be posting a lot more than once a week because the more you post, that is how customers are going to see you. So it's a very different ballgame depending on the industry that you're in. I think the rules of engagement are different based on the industry that you're in.
Yeah, definitely. Considering social media is very personal, both personal accounts and also business accounts, and just considering like who you are as a business or as a person.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about personal versus more professional, if we're going back to like our branding series that we're currently in now and how that branding that we create through the stylescapes, through the messaging, through the color palette and everything's very intentional. Like, how does that show up in social media and how do businesses do it well? Because there's a lot of businesses that can take their brand and you're just like, well, they kind of lost it. Like, and they didn't keep that same tone. The tone is different.
Yeah.
They have a different intern on it taking it over and the voice changes and the consistency in the voice and the consistency in that brand, it matters. So like in your guys' words, how does a business take that branding and make sure that it shows up on social for them?
In terms of branding, I think it's very much you are viewing social media as just another arm of your brand. For us at DayCloud, that involves making sure that we have all of the graphical assets that are necessary that are in the brand kits that, like, you know, for any one of our clients, I have all their logos, I have their color palette. I'm keeping an eye on how we present them on their website, their language, thinking about their audience, how we want to communicate, what tone we want to have with them. Also just like hashtag strategies and Instagram SEO, like captions, just thinking all the time about how we can be reaching who we need to be reaching. And once again, it's like social media is so personal. Branding is so personal. So just keeping that consistent. If somebody goes to your website and they scroll down and you have one of those Instagram embeds and they see that your posts are completely different, it's going to feel disconnected. And it's the same if they actually go to visit your Instagram. You know, they want to go there and they want it to feel cohesive, like any branding.
Yeah. The other thing I would add to that is a big part of what we do at DayCloud is that we start with a lot of intentionality and strategy at the beginning before we start posting anything for any sort of client's social media. So like what Keaton is saying, we always start with a plan, basically. And the plan is based off of, okay, if the branding says the tone of voice is serious and professional, then here are ideas for what the captions could be based on a serious and professional brand. And if the brand is, you know, the colors are green and tan and whatever, then here are examples of what that could look like in social media graphics. And we build out templates and we build out examples and we build out a whole plan. Like some of these clients, we will even build out a whole stylescape that is just social media. In the same way that we build out a stylescape for a brand, we'll build out a stylescape that is just social media posts. And within that, we'll build out templates for social media posts that we will then drop into like a Canva doc or something so that our marketing people can take those templates and utilize all the elements that they need in order to build out all the different post types that they need. And so a lot of it is we first start with intention and first start with a plan. And then that gives Keaton and his team the ability to be fully resourced with, hey, this is how I know that I am posting within the house of the brand that we have built already. So I think that's a lot of what we do to make sure that it is branded to the T in every channel, but specifically for social media too.
Yeah. I think in that, like to that point in our discovery meeting, we understand the audience very well through a multitude of questions. And so like we understand who's on Instagram, a little bit younger generation versus Facebook, a little bit older, LinkedIn, more polished, more professional. And the voice, it sometimes shifts depending on the platform, but also understanding your audience is huge and how they want you to show up for them. Because obviously for, let's say for like a law firm for something very serious, like I don't need a Duolingo type of social media where they kill off their mascot or the Nutter Butter chaos. Like I don't want a law firm to have a chaotic social media. I need you to have your buttons all done. Like I need everything to be like to the nines. And like, I don't need my law firm social media to look like that. And so understanding your audience, like we said in our discovery meeting, and not just the audience, but asking like a million questions to help us understand that industry or that business and that brand and their people. It helps us in the branding process, but also helps us set the business up for long term.
I love it. That's good.
All right. So if we're talking about social media, and I know it's a lot of work to put together all of these different graphics and coming up with new topics to discuss, maybe it's a controversial topic, but what are your thoughts, Keaton, on repurposing content?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think repurposing content is perfectly fine. It's just, once again, being very intentional and strategic about it. Don't just be posting the same image as you posted last week and just trying to give it a new caption and just calling it good. I don't think that's necessarily ideal. But if it's something that you posted a long time ago, bring it back, or take some of the same clips that you've used recently and start combining them in a different way to a different trending sound. Or even if you're sending out a newsletter or if you have a blog, you can take content from your blog and you can start creating stuff just based off of your blog content. You can take a newsletter and you can turn it into a carousel. You can do the same thing with Reels. Everything, I think, is content. Everything is potential content. It's just a matter of learning how to identify it and learning how to spin it in the way that you need to. Yeah.
It's so true. And I would just attest to that same thing. One of the best things I've ever heard is from Gary Vaynerchuk. And he has this entire presentation about how to build hundreds of posts from one long form pillar content is what he calls it. And essentially what you do is you take, in his case, he will give 1 hour long talk, but like in some other people's case, maybe it's a blog post that you wrote. And then you take that pillar content, the long form piece of content, you take that pillar content and then you break it out into tons and tons of short form pieces of content. So if it's a blog that you're using, you take snippets from that blog and you drop it into a bunch of different quote blocks and then use all of those different blocks as individual pieces of content that you can post. Or you can take those quotes and then you also make those same quotes into reels. You can turn them into a video that you are like a talking head or all kinds of things. You can turn all of that same content into hundreds of tiny little pieces of content that get snipped together so that you have a ton of content from one main pillar piece of content. And ever since I've learned that, it's changed our life, right? Like we've talked a ton, Keaton, about how to do this and pull apart so many different pieces of content from long form pieces of content. And it's been so helpful in being able to utilize content and reutilize content and not having to recreate the wheel every single day. It's just been like so helpful in having to come up with types of content for posting on social media so often.
Yeah. And people probably don't really even notice if you posted something very similar a month ago, because there's so much content in our face, and for us to memorize every single piece that comes in front of us, like that would be near impossible. So the more you can get in front of your audience, whether it's through similar content, is totally fine.
Especially if your type of content is like educational, you have to say the same thing over and over and over anyway for people to truly either one, see it because of the algorithm, or two, actually understand what it is that you're trying to teach them. So it's honestly better if you can say it over and over and over again anyway for people. So it's good.
Yeah, I think it kind of just follows the idea of like, maybe the most embarrassing moment of your perceived life, nobody else remembers it. Nobody else remembers it. Nobody else is thinking about it. You might be spinning on it forever, but if you ask somebody about it, they'll be like, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, it's so important to recognize that it's very hard to track your return on social media. Because it's not always going to be monetary. It's going to be like, oh, I don't know why I only got 50 likes on this one and I got 100 and something on this one. And I don't know why I got a reach of 4,000 on this reel and only 1,000 on this one. And it's totally up the algorithm. Like, you may not be making a lot of money off of social content, but like at the end of the day, as long as you're putting out information that your customers want, like that's what actually matters. Not necessarily you overthinking what you're pushing out.
Exactly.
And that, like we talked about earlier, that you're there when somebody's looking for you.
Yeah.
You know, that you have content there that is not 2 years old, 3 years old, when somebody goes looking for the type of service or products that they're looking for.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good wrap up to this one. I think the one thing that comes to mind kind of off of this continuation is, as a small business owner getting into social media and trying to figure out how to navigate it, don't overthink it, but also don't expect it to translate completely into revenue right off the bat. That's one of the misconceptions I think businesses get into, is like, oh, I'm on social media, but nobody's come into my store and been like, oh, like I saw you on social media. And a lot of the things like we ask is like, do you ask people how they found you? And then a lot of times people don't, because sometimes it's just busy and those type of questions fall through the cracks.
Sure.
But yeah, so more to come on social media for small businesses. If you like this podcast, like, share, follow, and Keaton will be joining us for our next episode as well.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye, bye, bye.